Welcome to InvestorCOM's Wealth Compliance Leaders Series. In today's conversation, we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Michael Lubansky, Head of Product at RIA in a Box. You'll have a chance to hear more about Michael's background and the intersection of compliance and technology in the wealth management industry. Michael, you are a veteran in the regulatory compliance technology industry. I've asked you one too many questions probably, and you've had to wear multiple hats in your career. I'm curious what interested you in this intersection of regulations, technology, and financial advice.
Yeah, so good question, Parham. This is not necessarily something that everybody wakes up or is born to say, like, I want to do to solve compliance challenges through technology for investment advisors, but it's the place that I've found myself ending up, and it's been an interesting path and journey to get there. So so I've been in the financial technology space for I don't know, say 13 plus years at this point, and it's originally actually in a different sector of the financial space, more in banks and credit unions, and was originally with small, medium-sized kind of community and regional banks ultimately, but with regulation as well. There are different regulations than what I'm dealing with now, and found that there was ways we could build products, excuse me, through technology that could help with addressing some of these emerging regulations. And this was coming out of the financial crisis, and so there was a lot of demand for a lot of new regulations coming down the pike, and then a lot of demand for how do we solve these things. We could try to do it manually, so technology could help us, and so charting out a path for solving those problems. So that was step one. Step two, and so I developed some really great products during that time there with a company called SageWorks, and from there evolved towards looking at broader things in the capital market space, kind of innovation as it relates to data and data products, and looking in particular at compliance and connections as it relates to compliance, looking more on the side of things like sanction screening and OFAC lists and other things like that, but really connected data. And it was an interesting time. It developed also alternative data sources was kind of emerging for hedge funds. And so it was, again, a whole different area, but that led me on my path. And the next stage was working actually with a startup in the investment advisory space. I'd always had an interest in the kind of wealth management space previously throughout, some of the time in business school and other things where I engaged with that industry. And so worked with a small startup in that space and really got a more exposure, not necessarily in compliance for a period of time, but in other aspects of the investment advisory space. And so then when the opportunity arose at RIA in a Box, it was a great kind of intersection of everything that I'd done when it relates to compliance, as it relates to addressing compliance needs through technology, and then feeling like there was really an opportunity in the wealth management, in the investment advisory space for a disruptor to help kind of streamline some of these manual processes and provide solutions that would help build efficiency, so investment advisors could spend more time on some of the other things that would help them grow their business versus some of the manual intensive aspects of compliance.
Hey, reducing the manual processes in the wealth management sector, Mike, has been a common thread, I think, across both of our career and I guess current occupations. Let me ask you this. So as you said off the top, you've had to wear multiple hats, really a lot of work in the fintech space, and most recently in the I guess the reg tech space. If Mr. Lubansky had a magic wand, what are the top things you would do to transform our industry?
So I think one of the big challenges everyone faces when they're trying to address whether it be compliance challenges or just anything, because of the growing need kind of aspects of technology and data in particular, it's very challenging to integrate data between different systems and disparate systems. So I guess if I could wave a magic wand, I'd create a way for a more kind of seamless, effortless integration of data sources, so as to really simplify and create more efficiencies, so that there could be more time spent on actually solving particular problems with workflows and processes versus finding ways to make sure to integrate the data and make sure it was coming in accurately and everything else, or just connecting the data. So, so that would be probably, I guess, top of my list if I had kind of magic wand, is creating an easier way to create these kind of integrations of data across various systems.
Hey man, you might be onto $1 billion idea right there. There you go. Speaking of integrating data sources and disparate data sources, specifically in our space, Michael, we've now between InvestorCOM and RIA in a box, we've partnered on an application that tries to do that for the financial service providers and financial advisors. Specifically, we recently learned about the DOL's expectations around rollover recommendations, a fairly significant element of providing financial advice. And in your experience, what are some of the best practices for dealing with this regulatory change? And what role do you believe technology plays in adapting to these new regulations?
Yes, I mean, best practices for dealing with regulatory change for anyone in the space is to first understand and gain as deep of understanding as possible of the regulatory change and the scope of it and how relevant it is for the firm individually. I mean, for us as a technology firm, we're trying to understand in terms of like how does this work for our clients? What problems does it potentially surface? And how, and so from there, and then how would what I would look at as a technology firm was like how understand the what of the new regulation, and realize how would that challenge be addressed manually, which is the same thing that probably an advisor might look at, is like, okay, this is what I need to do. If there were no technology, how, by no technology meaning if I had not just paper and pen, but an Excel spreadsheet or whichever, like how would I need to solve this? How long would it take me? And then from there, like if I could do this more efficiently in an ideal world, what would I do? How would I, if I could wave a magic wand to have the technology, both the data integrations and the technology and process flow that could streamline this process, what would that look like? That's what I'm thinking about from a technology perspective. But even as an advisor, like that would be a good way to think about things, because you can say like, okay, at a baseline, I'm going to have to do this. I know I have to do this in some way, like, but is there a better way? And if so, are there technology providers or partners out there that can help me in doing this? And maybe sometimes have to be a combination of technology providers sometimes, but there's a lot of innovation going on out there. So be surprised sometimes people should expect, especially with regulatory change, that someone out there probably is looking at a way to do it better. And so definitely explore your options on those things. And even if you explore those things as an investment advisor, and find that you don't use the technology you explore, you may learn some things at least from those providers in terms of how they're doing things more efficiently. And maybe that helps you, at least in the interim, to do things more efficiently with your process. And over time, maybe you then decide to further leverage technology to even go the next step.
Right on. And you know what? I couldn't agree more with you on this, Michael, because when we recently conducted a poll in an industry event, we asked, hey, given the PTE 2020-02 regulatory deadline coming up the end of June, what are firms doing? How are you tackling the set of requirements? And this is conducted in March, just to give you timestamp this a little bit. 70% said, hey, we've got to your point about spreadsheets and PDF forms, they've got somewhat of a manual process that's effectively, it's a bit of a Band-Aid solution to meet the requirements. Now, obviously, firms will kind of look more seriously towards adopting technology solutions as that deadline kind of approaches. Now, in that light, let me ask you a couple more kind of final questions. Obviously, there's been a lot of change, a lot of regulatory change that you've come across personally, and you're sort of helping your clients with, Michael. There's been a lot of these changes in the wealth management industry, both in principle and spirit. How do you believe, theoretically, or maybe philosophically, technology can help on this front?
Yeah, so there's again the things we talked about a little bit through some of these other questions is, it's important to be able to connect data sources create consistent process and automate the busy work to allow really more time for true analysis and risk management. Those are the really big things that technology can help with. Is creating those connections to find, connect the data, and then create these efficient processes. The more regulatory change there is, the more technology is needed really to help solve and address these things, because the more difficult it then becomes to try to keep up with all these things manually with the spreadsheets and so on. And so you really want to get to a place where you can, anything that can be a little more automatic and take less time, you should do, especially if you've now got like 5 different new regulatory boxes to check, because you want to obviously have that automated so you have more time for true analysis. Even if it's compliance related, you want to be doing the analysis aspect of it, the parts that are going to really help you better manage the risk for your firm. So those would be kind of the big takeaways for me, and I think seems like those changes are going to continue, certainly, and so technology is going to continue to play a larger and larger role for really investment advisory firms of all sizes.
Michael Lubansky, it's been a pleasure. You've shared with us a little bit about your personal background, what you do with that magic wand, and obviously where you and I agree and align is advocating for technology adoption. Let's make the wealth management profession much more efficient, frictionless as possible. Thank you again for your time, and speak to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Parham, and thanks for having me on.
If you enjoyed today's session, please like the video and subscribe to InvestorCOM's YouTube channel for more around our Wealth Compliance Leaders series.